Okay, extension methods. What are extension methods? Extension methods provide us the ability to add methods to an existing class without changing its source code or creating a new type that inherits from that. Let me show you an example here. Think of the string class. Let's say we have a string variable called post, which supposedly should contain a long blog post. So this is supposed to be a very long blog post, blah, blah, blah. Now you have seen that in blogs, when you're looking at the index of the blog, you see the summary or shortened version of the blog post. So there are a number of words and then there is ... at the end. You may want to implement something like that to shorten your strings. Well, unfortunately, we cannot change the string class because we don't have the source code and we cannot inherit from string. Let me show you. So if I create a class here called public, say, public class rich string that derives from string, see, we get an error here. Cannot inherit from sealed class string. So in situations like that, we can use extension methods to add new methods to an existing class. So let me show you how we can create a method on the string that will look something like this. So I'm going to call it shorten, which gets a number of words. And then that would return, let's say, a shortened version of the post. To create an extension method, you need to create a static class. That's the convention that you need to follow. So we create a public class, public static class. A good naming convention is to start with the class you're extending, in this case string, and then add the postfix extensions. Now here you can write your extension methods. And you should start with public and static always. Now in this case we want our shortened method to return a string. And here is the name of the method. The first argument of this method should always be this and the type you're extending and give it a name. So that's a convention you need to follow. And in this case, we want our shortened method to take a parameter of type integer called number of words. So with that method, as you see, now that shortened method is absolutely fine. I didn't have to inherit from the string class or change the string class's source code. Now let's go ahead and complete this here. But before doing so, I'm going to put this class in a separate file. Start with resharper, Alt and Enter. Oops. Not happy. I'm using a Mac keyboard here. Alt and Enter, move to a new file. So if the number of words is 0, we would return an empty string. Otherwise, we need to break up our string by the space character. So I would say str.split, space character here, and that would give me all the words in this string. Now, if there are less words than the number of words we have requested here, we just return the original string. But if there are more words, we need to get only the first few words based on the number of words here. So what we can do is we use the take method. Look, take here is an extension method. So if you look at words, the type of that is a string array. String array, which is an array, does not have a method called take. Later, Microsoft created an extension method called take that can be applied on any class that implements IEnumerable interface. In this case, the string array. So we use take method here, and I take this number of words, and I will join them with the space character and just return that. Now to make my code a little bit more robust, if the consumer of this method sends a negative value as the number of words, that doesn't make sense. So I'm gonna do some defensive programmer here. Say if number of words is less than 0, through new invalid argument, no, throw new argument out of range exception. There you go. And we give it a message. Number of words should be 0 or should be greater than or equal to 0. Maybe even 0 shouldn't be a valid choice. Anyway, so let's review. We created a static class. We named it based on the class we're extending and the postfix extensions. All of our extension methods will end up here. In this case, we have only one extension method. They have to be public static, and their first argument should be this, the class we are extending, and give it a name. Now let's get back to our program. Now, because we are using that method on an instance of a string, when we go to the extension method, this first argument represents that actual instance that we are applying this method on. So let's verify that our code is working. So console write line, shortened post. Let's run the application. There you go. We only got 5 words. This is supposed to be, and we could actually make this method a little bit nicer and say, to indicate that there are more words, ... goes here. Let's run the application. This is supposed to be, so this is a good way of shortening strings. Now, a few things we need to cover here is, look at this namespace here, extension methods. This is the parent namespace for my application. So both this class and my program class are defined in extension methods namespace. But if I go and change this namespace here to something like extensions, what happens is if I go back to program, that method is not recognized. So that's a key thing you need to know about extension methods. They come to existence when the class that created them is in the scope. So in this case, I'm using resharper, and resharper automatically detected that that shortened method is defined in that class, string extensions, which is in the extensions namespace of extension methods namespace. So I can add that, we'll Alt and Enter. But the thing I don't like about this approach is if you are using a few extension methods here and there, you will end up getting a lot of namespaces like that on the top. So what I personally do is, because the string class is defined in the system namespace, and I'm extending that here, I would rather to use system here. This way, whenever I'm defining a string, I automatically have to import the system namespace, which gets that extension method as well. Another thing you need to know about extension methods is that even though you're applying them here on an instance of an object, they're essentially static methods. So as you can see here, there are static methods. But with this convention that we follow, we mark the class as static and the method as static, and this argument here, C# compiler allows us to use that method on an instance object. The difference is, if we use dot, note that, where is that? Dot shorten has a different icon from the normal methods, the normal instance methods defined in the string class. And that's the icon of the extension method. The other methods have this kind of purple cube. Shorten. So the lesson is, these static methods can be troublesome at times. The problem is, let's say you extend the string class, but the creator of the string class, in this case Microsoft, ends up changing the class's implementation. And they may create a shortened method with exactly the same signature, but it may behave differently from your code. What happens is that the instance methods get priority over static methods, so your code will never be executed. So what Microsoft suggests in their guidelines is use extension methods only when you really have to. If you have the source code of the original class, go ahead and change it there. Otherwise, create a new type that derives from that class and add your new method there. And if that doesn't work, then go ahead and use extension method. In practical terms, in the real world, most often you will be using extension methods instead of creating them. A very good example of that is the IEnumerable interface here. Let me create an instance of IEnumerable of integers. Let's call it numbers, and I assign it to a list of integers. So list is an integer as a generic, so is the IEnumerable interface. Now, if I type numbers dot, look, these are the methods that are defined in the IEnumerable, like getEnumerator. But look, these are the extension methods. And here I'm using resharper, and resharper is great because it's telling me that this extension method is defined in this namespace, link. So these are the extension methods that come with link, which allow us to query objects. So as you see, there are quite a bunch of them here. Very, very useful. I'll cover them in a future video. So if I want to use, let's say, the max method here, resharper automatically added a reference to that namespace. So that extension method is now valid. Now, max method, what it does is it looks at that list and returns the biggest number. So let's initialize that list. Here I'm using the object initializer syntax. I can put numbers here immediately, 1, 5, 2, 3, 10 to 18. Now I can use the max method, and that returns the largest number. And I can put that on the console. Let's run the application. So 18 is the biggest number. So as you see, these extension methods are very useful, and most often you'll be using them as opposed to creating them. That's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for watching.